Little Bird automates the discovery of the most influential experts online on any topic and provides you tools for engaging with those people and their content. And I'll come back to that in a little bit. But for now, how did I end up right here today? Well, it turns out 6 years ago, back when I was just getting started, I was writing for AOL. It was just before I made a leap from writing at AOL to becoming the first hired writer at TechCrunch. I was posting messages to Twitter and asking for advice about good blogs to read on a particular topic. And a man named Dave Kustin responded to me with some excellent feedback. A week later, Dave and I got to meet in person at a nerdy conference called GnomeDex in Seattle. We had a really good connection, and a week after that, Dave sent me an email introducing himself further and asking for some advice on a personal and professional matter. Our relationship started getting deeper and deeper, and over the next few months, Dave began sending me other answers to other questions I posted, story tips that were super valuable to me as a writer, and he made fun of me over and over again publicly online. He mocked me for doing things like posting about what I was eating for lunch, music I was discovering, participating in noisy hashtag chats. It was ruthless and it went on and on, but it made for an interaction where Dave and I are now Twitter buddies for life. Whenever Dave sends an email, I make sure to open it and respond. And 6 years later, here we are today with the hopefully mutually enjoyable opportunity to speak in front of you all and to get to know each other and one another's work all the better. So I don't know that public mockery is a scalable approach to relationship development, but it worked for Dave and it worked for me. And he was smart enough to know that it would work for me because I responded well to things like that. But along the way, I've made some other observations about additional tactics that I think may be all the more transferable, and I'd like to discuss them with you by going through a different framework, an explicit framework for strategic thinking that I've learned about just recently that I'm really, really excited about. I used to think that having a strategy just meant that you had spent some time thinking about things. And like all great unknown unknowns, once that got clarified for me, now I've become a zealot about a particular methodology for thinking through strategic problems or solutions to strategic questions. And this particular strategic framework that I want to explore influencer engagement with comes from A.G. Lafley, the former CEO of Procter & Gamble. Lafley's about to come out with a new book that was recently reviewed by the Harvard Business Review, where he said that any good strategy answers 5 questions. And those questions are, first, what does winning look like? What are the criteria for measuring success in the strategy that you're building? Second, where do we play to win? In a crazy world with finite amount of time and energy, where do we focus our limited energy in what milieus? How do we win where we play? What kinds of tactics are we going to employ in those milieus in service of our goals? Fourth, what core competencies can we rely on as we carry out those tactics? And finally, what measurement and management tools can we use to track progress towards those goals? And I have found myself, now that I have been introduced to that framework, to applying it to all kinds of things, like making a sales hire, or figuring out how I can jog more often. You name it, those seem like good, common sense questions to ask about just about anything. And so I'd like to use those as a framework to explore some opportunities that online influencer identification and engagement might provide. Now, some of this stuff may seem a little obvious, especially in retrospect, but I think there's a certain magic to making things explicit. I think that a good consultant often confirms things from a credible perspective that you had suspected were true all along. And if you saw a recent Fast Company story about an experiment that the Khan Academy did, that makes me think all the more about the magic of making things explicit. Khan Academy, as people know, I'm sure, has a huge scale of people of all ages coming through to learn a wide variety of topics. And they recently did an experiment where they found that if they made an explicit reference to the plasticity of the human mind and the ability to build learning capacity at the top of every page on their site, they saw a 5% increase in the effectiveness of the learning experience across the board for all their students. So even if some of this stuff seems obvious in retrospect, I don't think all of it will, and I hope that you'll come with me through this conversation and exploring these concepts with regard to influencer engagement. So the first question is, what does winning look like? What do we need to accomplish in order to feel like a strategic engagement with online influencers has been effective? And the first thing that almost everyone comes to us at Little Bird, and part of the reason why we built the company was because people would come to us and say, we need to promote our materials or our clients' materials. We need to know who to promote to and how to most effectively promote. And promotion was the beginning and the end of the process. And that's understandable. In the original days of social media, most of the market's reaction was, oh my goodness, there's bloggers and tweeters talking about me, that's terrible. And then a logical next step would be to say, ooh, I wonder if I could get bloggers and tweeters to talk about me. Now, throughout the process of talking about what winning looks like, I want to talk about a particular example, that being, in fact, a Voce client, a company called NetApp. NetApp has been incredibly successful in social media and credits Voce in large part for helping build that success. And when it comes to promotion, NetApp certainly appreciates the value of influencer engagement and outreach for promotional purposes. The company has, and if you'll forgive me for making a second reference to this metric, the company has a clout score of 82. How many B2B tech companies do you know that have that much oomph to have a clout score like that? Say what you will about that metric. I think that's pretty impressive. But promotion is just the beginning of what influencer engagement really offers. And if that's all you or your clients are looking for, then you're leaving a whole lot of value on the table. Over at Little Bird, we like to say that there's a pyramid of goals that one can strive for in influencer engagement, beginning with promotion, followed by engagement. Engagement is a process that will surely benefit the effectiveness of your promotion substantially. If you've got an established history of engagement, then every pitch is going to carry a lot more weight. It won't be a cold call. And that's always been the first thing that I've advised consulting clients to do before they do a product launch or what have you, is to start building relationships, sending replies, posting comments as early as possible so that you're just that person who's always had all those really smart things to say in conversation when it comes time for you to send a pitch to them instead of it being a cold sort of call. Now, I said that I would mention NetApp in all of the different examples of goals for influencer engagement, and NetApp appears to really appreciate the opportunity for engagement as a goal as well. In a Little Bird report on data storage, we found that NetApp has won the attention and engagement of more data storage thought leaders, influencers, and experts than any other player in the market. Compared to competitor EMC, NetApp has won the engagement of 30% more influencers and thought leaders, even than its giant competitor EMC. So when engagement is taken really seriously, it offers not just a boost to promotion, but also opportunities to learn, opportunities to build credibility, and all kinds of unforeseen opportunities that come just from rubbing elbows with leaders in the field. I'm sure all of you have seen that already, but I just wanted to make it explicit. And so the third opportunity for a goal that we think of as made available by influencer engagement is research and learning. We always argue that if your influencer engagement can begin with a foundation of research and learning about the field that can then inform and empower your engagement that will then amplify your promotional activities. But there's an awful lot of value to be captured in research and learning just in and of itself. And this is the last time I'll reference NetApp, but I have to because their head of social media marketing has a wonderful thing to say on the topic. That is from an interview in Business Journal Online. NetApp social media manager Tina Ashamala was asked where she saw the future of social media going. And I thought it was great. She said, "I see it focusing more around listening and engaging with customers and partners and less about the fun campaigns that you can run, at least in the B2B space. There is a ton of customer intelligence and competitive intelligence that social can add value to, and most companies aren't using it for that at this point in time. Eventually, it will help mold the way we go to market with new products." And I think that's a really sophisticated understanding of social media. And I want to tell all of our customers that they should look at the opportunities in influencer engagement similarly. I think that's awesome. So that's a pretty thorough discussion of what winning might look like. Some opportunities for goals that I want to make explicit. I'm sure you've got your own, but hopefully that's helpful and interesting. The next question that A.G. Lafley asks is, where do we play to win? There's only, the web is huge, life is short. Where do we put our time and energy? And I would like to argue that the first good place to engage is with early adopters. Now, some people are concerned that early adopters are just a niche audience that isn't representative of mass audiences, but especially when it comes to social media and expertise and influence, I think that they've really got some things going for them. And that is in large part because on the internet, being the first person to know about something really good is an incredible high. Being the first person to tell someone else about something really good is a great source of power. And if you can be the first place that someone finds out about something awesome over and over again, then you've got an audience member, a community member, an influential connection for a long, long time. And that's where those of us who were professional bloggers really came into a position where we were able to make a living blogging, was by hustling all day to try to find that next new, interesting, compelling piece of information that no one else had found yet. It's an adrenaline rush, and it's a great source of opportunity. So what that means is two things. First, that those early adopters are uniquely accessible because they have a definitive need to find out things first and have more open arms and a more open inbox than people who are engaging with the news cycle perhaps later along the curve. And because there are people who are early adopters in any particular market that are so focused as their entire means of engaging with the web on finding things that are new and fresh, if you can identify those people effectively and more early in the process than your own competitors, then you may become effectively the first place that other people discover new sorts of things. When I was writing online, I was able to break a lot of news stories. And it wasn't necessarily because I was the first human being on Earth that knew about a lot of this information. Instead, it was that I figured out ways to identify who those first people on Earth likely would be, and then watch those people. When I was writing at AOL, for example, I discovered that there were off-the-shelf tools for getting RSS feeds sent to you by SMS alert. And so I went and I grabbed a short list of blogs from top vendors and influencers in the space, and I said, send me a text message as soon as these blogs update. And so the one I used in particular was built by a man named Samir Patel, who's now a prominent leader over at SAP, but he just had an off-the-shelf little freaky web startup 6 or 7 years ago. And so I would get text messages within 5 minutes of blog posts from companies like Technorati or YouTube or what have you back in the day, MySpace, whatever the case may be. And I would take a look at them on my phone, and if they smelled like news, like an opportunity to go and tell the rest of the world that before anyone else did, I would go and do so. And I was able to be first on a lot of stories that way until one day Mike Arrington called me up. And he said, I don't know how you do it, but you keep beating me to news stories. And I want you to come and be my first writer at TechCrunch. And so I did. And then after he hired me, I told him about the text message thing. And he said, oh, all right, well. But I've taken that same kind of approach now throughout the rest of my career, trying to find systematic ways to discover the early adopters, the early voices, and hear from them as early as possible so that I then could be the earliest place that other people who are less focused on being first and being early in conversations, so that I could be the first place that they heard about those things from. The last story along these lines, but one that's kind of fun, is about another methodology that we developed at Read Write Web, where we noticed that there were certain people that seemed to find interesting companies and products and startups before anybody else, and we thought there's got to be a systematic way to identify these people and track their tastes. So what we did is we referenced the then thriving community around Delicious, the social bookmarking startup. We had a researcher on staff at Read Write Web go back through the years of history at Read Write Web and find all of the companies and the websites and the products that we had written about, grab their links and look them up in Delicious, and look at all the people who had bookmarked those same companies and links. And we scrolled back through reverse chronological order to find the first 20 people who bookmarked a company or a product that Read Write Web later wrote about. And we copied their usernames and we pasted them into a spreadsheet. And then we repeated that process 300 or 400 times. And then we sorted the spreadsheet alphabetically and found 15 people who on 5 or more occasions had been amongst the first 20 people to bookmark something that we at Read Write Web later deemed compelling enough to write about. So we subscribed to the RSS feeds of everything those people bookmarked in the future. And time again, some of those people knew they were early tastemakers and some people didn't. But we watched them closely because they had a demonstrated history of being early on valuable information. And so we just sat by that part of the river of information and said, we're going to watch this little stream because we know it's delivered good stuff in the past, and we were able to pick out really interesting products and companies before Mashable, before TechCrunch, before GigaOM, over and over again, using that and other kinds of methods along those same lines. So, and we were able to build an audience that way and build Read Write Web from a staff of 3 to a staff of 25 through an exit to Say Media, and it was happily ever after that. So early adopters are good stuff. Shorter stories around deep technical experts. The web and the world are so noisy and so busy right now, and everybody knows that more and more business conversations are coming online and into social media, that there are that credibility is a key calling card to slice through that noise and rise up above the noise of people's inboxes, of their @replies and what have you. And if you can credibly engage with deep technical experts in a way that makes you quickly more informed about the market at hand, then the residual expertise and learning that comes from engaging with those people can be super helpful in turning and facing the other direction and telling stories and communicating back out to people who are less expert. So those deep technical experts are really, really significant. And then finally, the content of both of those groups are also an important place to focus. So Eric Schmidt, former CEO of Google, once said that humanity now creates as much data in 2 days as we have created throughout the entire history of the human experience up through 2003 in aggregate. Every 2 days, we reproduce that much. And he said that 3 years ago, before Instagram even existed, before all kinds of different things, before everybody was running around with Fitbit and Nike quantified self kinds of stuff. So there's this huge exploding mountain of data, in large part that comes from user-generated content, and I would argue that through that there is a sweet vein, a motherlode of the very best content that's been created by technical experts and early adopters and people who've been leaning in to watch the future and build it for an extended period of time, that if we don't focus on the archival content of those early adopters and the deep technical experts, then it's like we're starting every conversation over again from first base. When there's an opportunity to leverage a history of interactions and content to start our engagements, our communication with our influencer targets, with our audiences at a higher level of being informed. I was able to recount the history of Dave and I's interaction in such explicit detail, thanks in large part to the new Twitter historical search, where I can go back and pull up exchanges that we've had from over the last 7 years. We were able to raise $1 million as a startup company in large part because our lead investor, Mark Cuban, had emailed me out of the blue 7 years prior asking for advice about one of his portfolio companies. Before I was at TechCrunch, I think before I was even at AOL, just when I had a personal blog. And I thought, this has got to be a scam. Why would Mark Cuban email me? And there was a link to some weird looking website, but it had his email address. So I hit reply and I said, "Dear Mr. Cuban, I think someone is impersonating your email and sending out this weird link to places." And he said, no, that was me. I read your personal blog and I like what you say about RSS and search, and I wonder if you'd take some time to take a look at this portfolio company that we're doing work on. And I said, whoa. I said, well, I'll make you a deal. I'll do that if you'll do an interview with me for the nonprofit group that I work for. And he said, okay, sounds good. And then 7 years later, we're trying to raise money for Little Bird, and I was hitting my head against the wall a lot because you have to be told no over and over and over again in fundraising before you get told yes. And my wife and co-founder, Michelina, said, don't forget Mark Cuban. And so I went back into Gmail and I pulled up the old thread from 7 years prior. And I hit reply. And I said, hey, Mark, I don't know what you've been doing for the last 7 years, but here's what we've been doing. And by the way, here's a bunch of interesting information about the Dallas Mavericks that you may or may not know. And I said, to be honest, I don't know anything about the Mavericks at all. But we've built a technology that will help you discover all kinds of interesting things about any subject, and I'd love to tell you about it. And he wrote back in 10 minutes from his phone while on the elliptical trainer and said, I'm very interested in this. And we negotiated quickly, and then after that, all the other investors came together real quick. But that archival content, thank goodness the internet, thank goodness things are here forever once they're on the internet. People tend to focus on the negative side of that for shame and youthful shenanigans. But were it not for that archival nature of things, I couldn't tell the funny story about Dave making fun of me, and I don't know that I would have a company today. So I think that those are good places to focus when engaging with influential people on the internet, with those early adopters, the deep technical experts, and with their content. Now, explicitly on Twitter, because it's so broadly adopted across all kinds of different sectors, we see that at Little Bird. That's part of the value proposition of the company, that no matter what your sector, there's probably people on Twitter doing things. LinkedIn is becoming the preeminent business publisher on the web. And the forums are an incredible place to go and find influential people having valuable conversations. Google Plus, a lot of people make fun of, but as someone with a large audience on Google Plus, I can tell you there's a lot of really smart, really engaged people who do participate meaningfully and that you can connect with there. And then blogs, of course. And today, Little Bird, for what it's worth, and the public-facing version focuses on Twitter. On our upcoming version, we cover all of those things to discover experts in all those different places. So we have got through a couple of, I think 2 or 3 of those 5 questions, probably the most long-winded answers and explorations so far. But I thought it might be appropriate to pause and ask for questions or thoughts before continuing with the second half of the first half. Anybody have questions, thoughts?
Hi. I was just wondering how long it took you to actually go through and find the people that you were early adopters for the Delicious account, because that seemed like a time-consuming project.
Yeah, it really was. It was real arduous. To be honest, I had a family member work on that, and that made it so it hardly took me any time at all. But it was great. But one of the things that I like to do with research systems like that is to start doing the first few iterations of it myself to see how viable it seems and to get a picture of how long it might take. And then I double that, the duration, presuming that I'm going to pass it off to someone who lives less in the web necessarily than I do. And then, if possible, if it's appropriate, I like to pass it off over to a virtual assistant. Amazon's Mechanical Turk this spring announced that they are no longer open to employing people outside the United States, which is politically troubling, but will hopefully lead to an increase in quality of work. And I've often done a lot of stuff like that by tossing those kinds of questions over to Mechanical Turk. Like, here are 300 attendees at a conference. Can you please find me their homepage URL, their Twitter profile, their gender, presuming we accept gender binaries, the country, and whether they're from the United States or from outside of, and then get it back in a CSV file, sort it, and say, boom, here's a Twitter list of women from outside the United States who are at this conference. And it's the kind of thing that would have taken a really long time if I had to do it myself, but throw it out to a distributed workforce and, $30 overnight, and it's done. So that's one thought about that.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts, questions?
So with RSS Reader sunsetting, how's your workflow changed, and kind of what's your outlook on what effect that's going to have for desktop research?
Man, that is a heartbreaking situation. I remember when I first started reading blogs, there was this beautiful blog written by a young woman in Iraq who just, I can't, maybe somebody else remembers the name of this blog, something in Baghdad, who jumped on Blogger and was telling these really moving stories about being right on the ground. And I thought, I sure do hope that lots and lots of people read this blog, and lots of other blogs like it. And there was something about RSS readers that lowered the overhead to reading updates from blogs. It made it really easy to get tens or hundreds of blogs subscribed to and to get updates from them. And it was, from a reading perspective, it really let your attention and engagement scale. And then from a publisher or a blogger's perspective, it was just like a blast of oxygen from all of these readers that had newly scalable attention. And now, I guess, in addition to figuring out how to get on the a generator-powered laptop and blog on Blogger.com, a young woman like that had better be tweeting a lot too, or something like that. So that's a super big bummer, I think. There's certainly there's plenty of options for still reading RSS readers, but unless they've got critical mass and there's lots of people using them and they're real accessible, then the development of the technology is likely to slow down. So what I do, to be honest, these days, I especially since I don't look for news anymore as my primary objective, I try to figure out how to build a company, which I am learning the hard way is totally different. I was pretty sure that blogging about other people's companies was going to be really transferable into starting my own, and it turns out it's not quite. It's a whole new skill set. But one of the two things that I do are I've got bookmarked a whole bunch of Little Bird pages of the hottest news amongst experts in different fields that are of interest to me. So from content marketing to human-computer interaction to management, I've said, or learning, I've said, Little Bird, bring me the 500 most respected experts in the world in this subject and tell me each day what they are most excited about. And then I just drop by and I look at those. And I'll often find an article that's been discovered and vetted and shared and begun getting some traction amongst these expert communities. And then I'll grab it and I'll reshare it back out with my own editorial value added and with credit to the original influencer that did all the legwork to discover it. And by programmatically discovering who those voices were and what news was likely to be compelling, adding a little bit of editorial judgment and then adding value, my audience says, wow, Marshall sure does know a lot about HTML5. He must spend hours, scouring the feeds to find that stuff. And then the original influencers that shared the link say, who is this person that keeps sharing my content and adding interesting commentary and getting retweets and sharing it across networks? I'm going to stop and see who that person is. So I do that. And then I've been experimenting a little bit with some RSS coming out of Little Bird and getting push notifications for when things, using RSS, for when things cross over certain thresholds. So last night at about 2 in the morning, I got an alert that the software development world there was a glimmer of light bubbling up amongst European software developers about a particular story. And I opened it up and it said that the HTML5 working group had just whitelisted or put on the same level as mail to links, new links for Bitcoin transactions. Which is crazy to think that, click here to do a Bitcoin transaction is going to be as web accessible as a mail to link. But that just got edited into the HTML5 spec late last night, or that was when the conversation about that came up. And incidentally, this morning, apparently the PayPal CEO said we're thinking about supporting Bitcoin as well. So who knows? I can't handle too much Bitcoin, but I will stop in every once in a while to see what the experts in that field are most excited about. So I think a lot of the same kinds of strategies maybe, but with new tools, and I don't know, hopefully it'll be a change for the better, but it seems like a shame.
Hey, I've got one too. What are your kind of early impressions of Google Author Rank, and to what extent that's for the better or for the worse, surfacing a different kind of influence?
That is not the first time I've been asked that question, and it is the second time I've had to say I don't know. So, they say when customers ask for a feature twice or 3 times, then you better go build it. And I think that when people you speak to ask the same question more than once, you better go figure out what the answer is. I don't know. I've never really paid much attention to that as a publisher. I have always been more focused, and maybe that means I'm a one-trick pony and not a complete story around this, but I've been more focused on extracting value from the structure of the social web to try and come up with really compelling dynamic content and then just give it as much of my soul as possible and hope that the goddess of SEO treats it well in the future. But I don't know. Maybe we should talk about that. And I'd love to hear what your thoughts on it are.
One other question while we're on the subject of Google. Do you think that Google trying to optimize the search experience for each individual user will make it actually harder to find new and unique sources of content that you wouldn't normally find?
Possibly. I mean, it depends on what that looks like and how they handle it. I mean, if the emphasis is on surfacing things that you're sure to like, then that probably would cause a decrease in discovery. But if there is an intriguing exploration of things that you might like, and it's really genuinely what you might like in an exploration and some risk taking, then maybe that might change things. But it seems like Google, as a mass media kind of property, isn't necessarily the best place for, and most people probably aren't interested in really ambitious, forward-looking discovery of early voices. And so we've got to build our own tools or use other people's early tools. I used to love using PostRank a lot, which is this wonderful Canadian company where you could plug in any RSS feed and it would score every item in the feed on a scale of 1 to 10 by a relative number of comments, inbound links, saves and delicious, stuff like that. So you could say, here are 100 RSS feeds on a particular topic. Give me a filtered feed of only the relative breakout hits from each of these sources. So like at TechCrunch, a 30 comment post would probably be like a 2 or 3 out of 10. But at Read Write Web, a 30 comment post would be a 9 or a 10 out of 10. So you could get just the greatest hits on a daily basis, and then you could subscribe to a larger number of sources and say, oh, just throw them all in there and tell me what, let the social graph sort them out, or what have you. And then Google bought them and said, this would be really good for navel-gazing Google Analytics, publisher optimization. Why use it to listen to other people? Let's kill that part of it. So it's kind of an arms race, I feel like, if you're one of the people that wants to build competitive business advantage around discovery of information and sources earlier and earlier, then there's no solid ground over an extended period of time in order to do that.